Welcome to hell. Ha 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 ha.
Fuck. I really need to delete that app. I woke up drenched in cold sweat, my heart pounding against my ribcage as though it might burst through at any second. My sheets were tangled around me like a constricting serpent, and I had the distinct sensation that I was still trapped in my dream. In that nightmare, the devil himself had welcomed me to hell with a grin so wide, so horrifying, that my skin still prickled at the memory of it. His voice had been a low rasp, full of promises of agony and eternal torment. I could almost smell the sulfur burning in the air. Even now, as I tried to catch my breath, I could still hear his words echoing in my mind. You're mine. You just don't know it yet. I tried to slow my breathing, rubbing my arms to ward off the chill that lingered from the nightmare. My alarm blared on my phone, making me jump. 7 a.m. The red numbers glowed like tiny eyes in the early morning light. I shut it off, my hands trembling, and forced myself out of bed. My head felt heavy, like a balloon too weighted to float, and my limbs were weak, as though I'd run a marathon in my sleep. Downstairs, Mom was probably making eggs, the routine same as always. Everything was so ordinary, as though the devil hadn't just welcomed me to his fiery domain in my dream. Trying to shake off the lingering darkness, I splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom. The girl staring back at me in the mirror looked pale, her eyes tinged with fear. Stop being so dramatic, I told myself, but I couldn't help it. I was terrified. My nightmares had grown worse over the past few weeks, ever since my friends and I discovered the Ouija app on my phone. It had started as a joke one Friday night. My best friend Clara was obsessed with everything spooky. Haunted houses, horror movies, you name it. So when she found this new Ouija app that promised real-time communication with the spirit world, she dared us all to try it. Back then, it was just me, Clara, and Jenna, sitting cross-legged on Clara's bedroom floor, lights turned off, phone screen illuminating our faces like ghostly masks. We giggled at first, not taking it seriously. "You guys are taking it way too seriously," Jenna had said, rolling her eyes when Clara shushed us. But Clara insisted on total silence and concentration. The instructions told us to place our fingers lightly on the glowing virtual planchette on the phone's screen. We asked silly questions. Is anyone here? What's your name? Are you a ghost? The phone would move, seemingly on its own, spelling out random nonsense. We laughed, teased each other for moving our fingers, until the words it formed began to make too much sense. That night, the letters spelled out dark, pain, and take. Something about those words made a chill dance across my spine, though I tried to laugh it off. Looking back, I wish I'd listened to my instincts. Perhaps then, none of what followed would have happened. Over the next few weeks, Clara became obsessed with the app. Every chance she got, she'd open it up and communicate with whoever, or whatever, was on the other side. She convinced us to download it too, so we could play together when we were apart. Jenna and I felt an odd reluctance, but Clara's enthusiasm wore us down. The app itself had an eerie design, flickering candlelight, swirling smoke across the background. It even played ominous music whenever you opened it. The more we used it, the stronger our nightmares grew. Mine were always about fiery places, the stench of brimstone, and a deep voice calling my name from beyond. Jenna mentioned sleepwalking, waking up with bruises she couldn't explain. Clara? She was the worst. She began to talk in her sleep, chanting nonsense phrases. Sometimes her voice would sound different, lower, raspier. "I keep dreaming about the same place," Clara told us one afternoon as we walked home from school. She had dark circles under her eyes, her face pallid and drawn. A corridor lined with doors, each leading to something terrifying. And the phone in my hand always tries to guide me to one door in particular, but I never open it. I can't. I hear... She paused, swallowing hard. I hear screaming behind it. Jenna and I exchanged uneasy glances, not sure how to respond. That night, I got a text from Clara at 2 a.m. She wrote, "Something is wrong. I can't sleep. The app won't turn off." When I tried to call her, there was no answer. I lay awake for hours, listening to the quiet hum of the night, certain something terrible was happening. The next day, Clara didn't show up at school. Jenna and I texted her repeatedly, but she never responded. Worried, we walked to her house after class. Her mom answered the door, her face pale. "She's in her room," she said. "But she's been acting not like herself." We found Clara sitting on her bed, phone gripped tightly in her hands, the Ouija app open. Her eyes were bloodshot, ringed with purplish shadows. She stared at the phone, her lips moving wordlessly. Then she looked at us, her eyes almost black. "What are you guys doing here?" she snapped. Her voice sounded raw, angry. Her expression was one of utter contempt. "Clara, are you okay?" I asked, walking toward her carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. She jerked her head, and I noticed the goosebumps lining her arms. "I'm fine," she hissed. "Leave me alone." Jenna tried to take the phone from Clara. The moment her fingers touched the device, Clara let out a guttural scream, like an animal in pain. She shoved Jenna backwards with surprising strength. Jenna fell to the floor, tears in her eyes as fear contorted her features. "Clara, what's wrong with you?" I demanded, my voice quavering. "Nothing is wrong with me," Clara said. But her tone was flat, emotionless. Then abruptly she erupted into laughter, low and mocking. "I see everything now. You pathetic creatures. You have no idea what's coming." Jenna scrambled to her feet, and we both instinctively backed away. That was the first moment I felt it, the raw energy in the room, a suffocating presence that made it hard to breathe. Over the next week, Clara's behavior worsened. She stopped coming to school altogether, her eyes sunken, her hair tangled and unkempt. She spoke in cryptic sentences, sometimes in foreign languages I'd never heard before. Occasionally, a strange symbol would appear on her phone's screen, flicker, then vanish. In my own nightmares, I began to see that same symbol scrawled in blood on dark walls. One night, I got a call from Jenna. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Clara, she tried to hurt herself, but she wouldn't bleed. It was like something was protecting her, something inside her. She looked at me with her eyes completely black, and she laughed. My chest felt tight, my heart pounding like a drum. I knew I had to do something, anything to stop this. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and launched the Ouija app. The candlelight flickered across my screen. I placed my fingertips on the virtual planchette. A question formed on my lips. "What are you?" I whispered. The planchette scrolled through letters, the faint scraping sound eerily realistic. It spelled out 2 words: Legion, ours. I felt a drop of sweat roll down my back. My entire body trembled. I tried to close the app, but it refused to shut down. I pressed the home button repeatedly, tapped out of the screen, but it stayed frozen on that single horrifying message. Legion, ours. Eventually my phone flickered and returned to the home screen on its own. My reflection stared back at me from the black surface, eyes wide with terror. By the following day, Clara was gone. Her mother called Jenna and me, frantic. She couldn't find Clara anywhere in the house. I went over and we searched her room, looking for any sign of where she might have gone. The curtains were drawn tight, Her desk scattered with papers scrawled in that unfamiliar symbol. The phone was gone too. No note, only an oppressive stillness in the air. For days, there was no sign of her. Rumours started floating around at school. Clara had run away, she'd joined some cult. But Jenna and I knew better. Something took her. Something from that app. And then, a miracle. One night my phone buzzed at 3 a.m. It was a text from Clara's number. "Help me." I bolted upright in bed, ignoring the hammering in my chest, and called Jenna. We decided to drive out to the old abandoned barn on the outskirts of town, the place Clara had always joked was haunted. It felt like the only place that made sense. We found her there in the dark, huddled on the ground, phone clutched to her chest. Her lips moved soundlessly, eyes closed. "Clara!" I cried, dropping to my knees beside her. The smell of damp hay and rotting wood flooded my nose. Something felt wrong about the very air, like it was charged with a sickly electricity. Her eyes snapped open. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the real Clara behind them, a pleading expression. Then the darkness washed over her features again. She opened her mouth, and a voice that was not her own poured out. "We are many," it hissed. "We come for you all." I screamed, pulling back. Jenna stood frozen, her hands over her mouth. Clara, or whatever was inside her, cackled, staggering to her feet with unnatural grace. Her neck cracked at an odd angle, her limbs jerky. She advanced on Jenna, who let out a terrified squeal. I had to do something. In desperation, I lunged forward and grabbed the phone from Clara's grip. The screen burned my hand like a live coal. "No!" the voice shrieked, twisting Clara's features into a mask of rage. Ignoring the searing pain in my palm, I hurled the phone with all my strength. It smashed against a wooden beam and shattered, sparks flying in the darkness. For an instant, Clara collapsed to the ground, her body going limp as though all the strings holding her had been cut. Jenna and I rushed to her side. She blinked up at us, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I couldn't stop it. We helped her up, and she sobbed into my shoulder. Relief crashed over us like a tidal wave, but it was short-lived. As we stood there in the barn's shadows, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Slowly, with a trembling hand, I pulled it out. The Ouija app had reinstalled itself. The icon flickered on my home screen. I stared at it, my heart thudding dully. "We have to end this," I muttered. Jenna nodded, pale and speechless. But try as I might, I couldn't delete the app. Each time I dragged the icon to the trash, it vanished for a heartbeat, only to reappear again. I felt my pulse spike. I wanted to scream, to smash my phone to pieces, but something rooted me to the spot. The sense of a presence behind me, something unseen, made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. Clara, weakened, was leaning on Jenna, the colour returning to her eyes. But the malevolence in the air had not dissipated. I gritted my teeth. "Enough!" I shouted, tears burning in my eyes. "Just leave us alone. I'm done with this stupid app. I'm done with these nightmares. I'm done with you." With trembling hands, I dragged the icon one last time, pressed delete, and watched in horror as it reappeared instantly, mocking me with its candlelit icon. The air behind me turned hot, and I felt a hand, an impossibly large, scorching hand, wrap itself around my wrist. My skin seared under its touch, the smell of sulphur filling my nostrils once more. I couldn't even see it, yet the pain felt so real, so immediate. I staggered forward, the phone slipping from my grasp. That was when I felt it pulling me down. My mind whirled in panic, and all I could think was, "It's over. This is where I pay for my curiosity." The dream I had of the devil welcoming me to hell came flooding back, and I realized with sickening certainty that this moment had been waiting for me ever since we opened that cursed app. I have walked down a path of darkness, I choked out, tears streaking my cheeks as the searing pain intensified, and have no way of returning to the light. The entity yanked harder. Clara and Jenna screamed my name, but I could barely hear them. The world around me began to tilt, my vision darkening around the edges. With the last shred of strength I had, I screamed, "Jesus, help me!" In that final moment, as the hot hand pulled me downward, I saw the phone light up one last time. The Ouija app opened on its own, the letters DARK scrolling across the screen. Then everything went black.